Today we're going to take a look at the Husky 1050 AODD. We're going to service this pump and we're going to do it in three sections. One is we're going to start with the air valve and the pilot valves. Then we're going to take a look at the outlet and the inlet manifolds. And then we'll work on the center section. Always remember, before you start working on a pump, you want to follow the manual, follow your pressure relief procedure, and disconnect it from the system. Okay, we're going to work on the inlet and the outlet manifolds now. I'm going to start by removing the outlet manifold, and then we'll flip the pump over and do the inlet. And as I'm doing this, it's important to notice that this is an aluminum pump. The 1050 comes in many different configurations, both in plastic and metals. So while some of the components may look a little bit different depending on which pump you have, the procedure and the components are actually all the same. Okay, so I have the 8 bolts off the outlet manifold. I'm just going to lift the manifold up and off, and there's nothing left in the manifold because everything should have stayed with the main body. And this particular pump has some stainless steel seats and some PTFE check balls. Again, depending on how the pump was ordered, we have many different arrangements of seat material and ball material. So we'll set that aside. Because it's a stainless steel seat, we have PTFE O-rings. If it's a soft seat, in other words, a non-metallic seat, then there may not be any O-rings in it because the seat offers enough flexibility to be its own seal. Okay, so now I'm just going to flip the pump over, and we'll repeat the procedure for the inlet manifold. Now, because the pump is upside down, instead of the balls being on top of the seats, they're beneath the seat. But keep in mind, that's only because the pump is turned upside down. Okay, so we've removed the inlet and the outlet manifolds, the balls and seats. If you were simply rebuilding that part of the pump to repair problems such as poor priming or the pump not stalling because of a bad check or seat, you could at this point just rebuild it and put the pump back into service. So for this video, we're going to continue down to the diaphragms. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and remove the 2 side covers. We'll repeat the procedure for the other side. Okay, so now we have the fluid covers off and we've exposed the diaphragms. And this is an overmold diaphragm. We have several different materials of constructions for diaphragms and the way they're attached as well. For the overmold, you're going to want to peel back on the edge, both sides if you can, and just start turning one of the diaphragms off the shaft. All right, so for the diaphragm, there's going to be the plate on the back side, and then there's going to be a bolt that screws into the diaphragm itself. If this bolt comes loose during the taking down of this diaphragm pump, you're going to want to put a little hardening thread locker on there and reattach it and give it time to reseal. So once one side is off, Then we can push the other side out this other end of the diaphragm pump, and then you're going to want to put a wrench, or you can put this in a vise to turn this other diaphragm loose from the shaft. And we'll remove that side. And at this point, you're going to want to inspect the shaft and make sure there's no damage on the shaft. And you're going to want to inspect the bushings on the center section of the diaphragm pump to make sure there's no damage to the bushings. An indicator that one of the diaphragms may be ruptured or broken could be if you start seeing material coming out of the material you're pumping, coming out of the muffler or exhaust. All right, so I mentioned that this was an overmold diaphragm, and I'm just going to bring in another pump to show you an example of the bolt-through design. And on the bolt-through design, there's going to be some hex nuts on the bolts on the outside of the diaphragm. One of the things that you want to make sure you do when you take these apart is use the appropriate tools. If you use an adjustable wrench, there's always a little bit of give on the bottom part of the wrench, and that tends to round these edges off. So if you use a socket, or if you use a wrench that's designed for this size of a bolt, you will never damage those bolts. And again, just a different style of a diaphragm. This has the bolt that goes all the way through. It's a PTFE diaphragm with a backer. All right, everything else is the same as the overmold. We're just going to go ahead and put this back together loosely, and we'll set it aside, because there's one more thing on the center section, and those are the U-cups down in behind the bushings. So I'm just going to set it off on the side. You can take a pick, and just behind that bushing is going to be a U-cup, and you can just use your pick to pull it out. And then there's going to be one on the other side as well. One last thing on this center section, and that's going to be the housing for the air pilot valve. The air pilot valve goes through from the outside of the center section and comes out through this hole. So I'm just going to go ahead and remove that. And if you're removing and replacing this housing, you always want to remove the pilot valve before removing the housing. Okay, that completes the complete disassembly of the 1050 center section.